Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of D3 Minis. Today I have a former educator and now turned PR marketing agency guru, Hayley Evans.
Hello. Super fun to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. Something that I kind of want to start off with was we just approved some pay bumps for teachers.
Yeah.
From like 50,000 to like 54,000, depending on the city and stuff. Now you have experience.
Yes, I do. Yeah, long history, long background being an educator. Definitely a weird trajectory from kind of where you think you're going to be wrapping up high school, looking at college options and thinking, okay, I want to do this. I want to become a teacher, an educator, and taking those steps, going through the process. And then coming out the other side, getting into the teaching profession. And, this was back around 2016, 2017. And so it was a completely different landscape for teachers then, pre-COVID. I think everybody sort of segments themselves for COVID and life after COVID. But yeah, so definitely seeing the teacher raises is, it's heartening in one sense, because when I was in the profession, everyone was kind of screaming for that level of action, was screaming for, teachers need raises. But I think I'd be doing a disservice to my friends who are still in the profession if I didn't point out that the implementation of these raises for teachers, while it's a good thought, the planning and the follow through and the execution, I really think that we're fumbling the ball to some degree. Rationale on that, more or less. So if you're kind of following along with the teacher raise saga that's been ongoing, I guess basically since our gubernatorial race, where we had major change in the guard there, bringing in the burden for school districts of providing those raises without providing funding to make it happen. I had just transitioned out of teaching when the first major bills were passed, major initiatives to get that $50,000 minimum salary for teachers. And I think as much excitement as there was on the front end, and I got to kind of stand at the sidelines and sort of watch all this unfold without being affected by it, what I saw was school districts scrambling to find the finances to actually implement that and make it a reality. And because there really wasn't enough supplementary funds provided, what we saw was mass defunding of arts programs, massive, insanely weird changes to the teacher pay schedule. Are you familiar with the teacher pay schedule? And
They can kind of take like during the summer and then sometimes like a couple lumps.
Kind of. So, first of all, if people out there don't know this, you can Google right now and find out in any public school in Arkansas what an educator makes. You can, for most public schools, it's required that they list their teacher contracts on the internet, like the actual contractual obligation is listed out where anybody can go and kind of dig that up and look for it. And what I experienced when I was a teacher, specifically, I was a band director. And so I was in this very niche version of teaching that had kind of its own subculture around it. Has a lot of overlap being a band director with being like a coach. There's, all the summer responsibility and obligation. And so I was on what was called an extended teacher's contract. So that meant that I had so many obligations, throughout the summer and when teachers are supposed to be off. Side note, I have a lot to say about that. That my contract had more days required of work to justify the slight increase in salary. And that's common for a lot of teachers and specifically the coaching style educators, a lot of band directors and sports coaches. But all of that to say, what happened when we created this $50,000 minimum base salary for educators, which I think had previously been somewhere in the 30s. And I believe that the schools, there was like a legal minimum, but for the most part, most school districts would set what their minimum was. So one school may have a base salary of $32,000, and then you can stack some stipends and such on top of that if you qualified. Most teachers did not. Or you could go across town, and that school district may have a $40,000 starting base salary. So there was this kind of noble initiative to get that base to 50. But again, the issue was the lack of funds provided to the school districts. And so that money has to come from somewhere, right? Rationally, we know that. And so what ended up happening is they end up messing with the salary schedules for teachers, where before the $50,000 minimum rule, you would have a teacher starting on day one. They would start at a 0 step, meaning they have 0 years of experience. And so at step 0, you essentially are only making whatever the base salary is that school district offers. And then if you are some kind of coaching or coaching equivalent educator, then you may have extra days in your contract that give you a little extra money. You may have an index or a stipend. And that would come out to be a little bit of a bonus, but in exchange for lots of extra hours and lots of extra days worked. And so the result of this messing with the salary schedule meant that teachers who had 0 or 1 or 2 years of experience, who were at that base salary rate of somewhere usually in the 30s in most districts, lower than 50, all of a sudden they had to come up to 50.
Yeah.
Which meant that you had teachers who were near retirement age that were maybe after 20, 30 years of commitment to the same school district, or at least the Arkansas teaching system, they end up getting their salaries lower.
Yeah.
Because we have to bring everybody up to 50. Well, if someone else is at 62,000 because they put 20 years in, which is, now that I'm out of the profession, it's obscene to me that you would have to, to get a $20,000 pay raise, that it's going to take 20 or 30 years to try to get there.
Yeah.
But all of that being said, that came straight out of the pockets of a lot of educators near retirement age. It also came out of the pockets of funding for other school programs. Specifically, I could get way into school budgets and the fallacies behind funding, especially funding arts programs. We all hear that all the time, that the arts are underfunded. But there is kind of a lot happening behind the curtain, especially in Arkansas, where school administrators are voting with their dollars and telling kids that if you are born interested in playing football, you are more valuable to our school district, more valuable to our community, and you are worth more monetary funding as a football or baseball or basketball player than if you are born just interested in being in art class or choir or band.
Now, this is your first time on the podcast.
Wow.
Typically, we'll start off with where you're from.
Yeah.
And you're originally from Arkansas.
I am, yeah. So, Arkansas native. Yeah. I'm from I don't want to say the world's tiniest town, but if you are an educator or you have a kid in school, you know that AAA kind of ranks the school district sizes on the letter A. So you have a 1A school district would be the tiniest, and then a 7A school would be the largest. I was from a 2A school. So I graduated with about 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 kids total. I remember the town's called Magnet Cove, and my junior year or senior year of high school, they decided they wanted a billboard, because this particular school district, you literally will not get to it unless you drive out of your way off of a major highway to go directly there, And so they're like, we need a billboard right before the turn so people will actually come here and know that we exist, which, now I'm in marketing and PR, good move to whoever made that decision. They're like, let's get a picture of all the kids, K through 12. We'll put them on the football field and we'll take a picture for the billboard. We'll do them. It's called Magnet Cove. So they put us in the shape of an N, I believe, where they wanted the N from the football field to be in the shot. Anyway, the entire school district could stand on the logo of the football field. The K through 12, all of us, they're looking back now that there couldn't have been, a total enrollment of like 2,000 or 3,000 kids total, maybe. Yeah. But that's how tiny and compact we are. We can stand on the football logo, K through 12. And so, teeny tiny.
And
little
you continued your education in Arkansas?
I did, yeah. I went right up the road to Russellville. And again, I think when you're a high school kid and you're deciding to become a teacher, I think I'm going to speak really broadly. So please don't come at us in the comments. I'm going to make some generalizations here. But generally, what I've observed once I got into the teaching profession, there are kind of two broad groups of people that decide to become teachers. I think category one are kids that had a great time in high school and they want to ride that wave out for the rest of their lives. You know, if they were at the top of the status quo, if they were the top of the social pyramid, they had a damn good time, you know, playing football. Now they want to go coach, you know, or they want to coach cheer, or they, you know, so they want to come back to that thing that felt like home and felt really great to them. They felt like they belonged. The other category, and I think we can talk later about how this plays out with the adults. The other category is definitely a category I fell into, which was kids who had a horrible time in school and maybe they had one or two high school teachers or junior high teachers that mentored them and helped kind of help them make it through and sort of survive.
Yeah.
And inspired them into the teaching profession.
Yeah.
And then I certainly am in that second category and kind of went into it with this nobility complex, thinking I was going to go in and sort of systematically change everything from the inside.
I'm going to be that person.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be me. It's me. I'm capable.
And were you familiar with college? Like, did most people in your family go to
No. So my mom that raised me, she was a nurse. She went to community college. I think received an associate's of nursing. But beyond that, you know, most of my family did not go to college. I wasn't, you know, because of her associate's degree, I wasn't quite first gen. And we were really lucky growing up that we had that income that my mom brought in from being a nurse. But my dad, you know, didn't go to college, graduated high school. Most of my family, you know, high school graduates, and then went to kind of work somewhere sort of local to West office or work for the city doing construction. And so it was a big deal that Hayley was going to college. It was a big deal that I was able to go on a scholarship that paid for all of it from playing trumpet. My primary instrument is trumpet. And so going on a band scholarship, you know, was kind of this wild thing. It was really exciting at first, but then once I got into school and I would come home for the summer and see family again, I had one family member ask me at one point, so in music school, do you take any real classes or are they all just music classes? You know, meanwhile, I'm like in a practice room practicing for 6 hours a day and I'm crying and I'm tearing myself down, like just trying to be really, really great at performing on this instrument, you know, and the rigorous coursework and intense private study that comes with a music education degree. And then, you know, to feel after 4 years in college that you are super competent at playing an instrument just to go and become a teacher, where playing an instrument is not your job. And hardly teaching instruments was even my job as a teacher. But yeah, so there was an interesting trajectory from kind of this teeny microscopic town to Russellville, where I had a great time going to school and kind of learning who I was going to become and just fueling up that fire every single day to go in and like systematically change the education system for nerds. That's what I really thought was going to happen. I was so sure that I was going to get out there into the public school system and people were going to listen to me. I was going to be able to explain, you know, why we needed certain changes, you know, at scale in public spaces.
Okay. So, and then once you graduated and you came to Northwest Arkansas to teach?
Yeah. So, my first job was at a 4 or 5A school at that time, kind of east of Highway 49 on that side of town. And, it was a very sobering first year experience. The first things that I noticed pretty quickly, and again, this predated the teacher raise scenario that we're seeing play out now. But I had my first realizations of that sort of two-party system with my work colleagues. Because very quickly, even as adults, I started to feel myself becoming the little nerd kid again. And I had all of the arts teachers that were kind of suddenly the lowest on the totem pole, not just financially, not just from a program funding standpoint, not just the way the kids were treated, but all of a sudden it was still the jocks versus the nerds.
Such a hate when that happens, whenever you like grow up and you're in a space where there's still like bullies or like
it was
you're not cool enough.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're so over this.
We're over this. We're adults. But yeah, I think what was wild to me, it's one thing if it happens in like a corporate work environment, which I, spoiler, got out of teaching and kind of went straight into that world as a pivot strategy. But yeah, it was really disheartening to see that ecosystem was still thriving, and that the internal mechanisms behind education and teaching were still driven by a jock is in charge and they're telling a nerd what to do for them.
Yeah.
I ended up working at 3 school districts in this area before I left the profession. And that was consistent everywhere that I worked.
Yeah.
I thought for a long time, I thought what I was going to be working on changing when I got into the profession was really more logistic related. Like, if we can just figure out how to communicate to the powers that be, the mythical, at that time I didn't have the awareness of what that actually meant, but whoever is in charge of the money, if we could just explain thoroughly, surely no one's thoroughly explained yet.
Did you try this?
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Surely no one's has explained it as thoroughly and impassioned as I'm capable of doing. I roll. We'll just redirect funding, and that will take care of the logistics behind why the arts aren't supported. But what I quickly found that I realized was the reason that nothing was happening, and I think this should be studied. In fact, I'm sure in a past life I was an investigative journalist because there is a real connection. There's a real pipeline from sports coach of some kind directly to superintendent of the school district. And I'm just going to pause right here and say, I'm just going to speak really directly. I wish someone would study, someone should, cough, cough, what percentage of Arkansas superintendents were coaches, because every single school district I worked at, all 3 of them, had a superintendent who had started as a coach, some kind of an assistant, maybe they're the lowest rung when they first come in and they're going to get whatever that sport is. Nobody wants to coach. Mm-hmm. Then they become an assistant coach, then a head coach. Then they're going to go ahead and get an ed leadership master's, which is the additional degree needed to start administrating and be a principal. They're going to get some kind of assistant principal job. Then they're going to be building level. And then before you know it, they are pulling the purse strings as a superintendent. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, so for example, the final school district that I worked at, every single school had some version of this. Mm-hmm. But generally these schools, these are 4 or 5A school districts. They're 5, 10x the size of where I went to school, mm-hmm. which is a very underdeveloped area in terms of community population size. These larger communities, what I would consider, based on where I grew up, that have dilapidated buildings. The school is 50, 60, 70 years old. There's leaks in the ceiling. The carpet is stained. There's mold everywhere. There's mold in the band instruments that the kids are playing. There's, all of these issues, structural issues with the building. And it's gross from the outside. It's gross from the inside. And 30 feet away is a multi-million-dollar sports complex that was built 2 years ago.
Yeah, I will say, I wish people would notice how important it is to be aware of your school district, your school board, everyone that's on there. There's a problem going on with the school district out here. And it's interesting because the president of the school board is also the chief of police, which should be, that should be
very like a gross conflict of interest.
In
this world, it certainly would be.
Yeah. And you get to vote on those people who are like, in school districts and stuff. You have to pay attention to those.
Sure. Yeah.
We had a guest on here before who was running in Bentonville to be on, I believe it's the board. I could be wrong. But something to do with the school.
Sure.
And, it's just very important to be aware of those things because there's a lot of money going into it. And these are your children or, your friends' children, and it's the future.
These are the people that have a more tangible impact on your day-to-day life.
Yes.
Than any gubernatorial race or any presidential election. And yes, I mean, everywhere I worked, a coach of some variety was the superintendent or had just been the superintendent. And they were all of their best buddies that they grew up playing football with were the school board. In fact, again, the school that I worked at most recently before getting out, the same guys that moved the yard markers at the football game, for where first down happens, they were the school board. And the superintendent, they all went to school together and played high school football together. So we see that juxtaposition of the main school buildings where every kid, goes in every single day to receive an education is falling apart, dilapidated, underfunded, just in general. And then we have this particular school district has a indoor turfed football field. So we've already got the main 2 or 3 football fields on campus, but we also for some reason needed an indoor version of a football field.
Field house.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a field. I mean, it looks like something out of a movie. It's got a loft in it with a full-blown Planet Fitness style workout center. They've got state-of-the-art, cryotherapy level, the kids are going to need to pee themselves. Yeah, they've got physical therapists, and that is great. I'm not saying take that away, but it's just the deep sense of irony that, when I at that time was riding a school bus to take the band kids, to a competition, the bus driver is the lead math ELC leader, which, basically is a math department head at the middle school, tells me that they haven't had math textbooks in nearly a decade.
Yeah.
But this facility is sitting out here, which, by the way, counted towards the overall, that facility, square footage in that building, which, as you can imagine, it's an indoor football field. It's humongous.
Yeah.
That square footage counted towards the overall learning square footage of the entire district.
Oh, wow.
So when they needed to apply for grants or raise their hand to the state and say, hey, our buildings are falling apart, they look at this, whoever's deciding about those state-driven funds looks at the facilities in the school district, and they're factoring in, when we total the age of all your facilities, this one that was built just 5 or 6 years ago, brings the average age of facilities up through the roof, brings the amount of square footage up through the roof, when that's not a clear reflection of what's actually, usable
for everyone.
Exactly.
Certain students.
Exactly. And either a school administrator was ill-equipped making that decision, or what I actually suspect is that they were just like, I don't care, I'm a football guy, football, we need this. And I don't want to hate on football. I've been to hundreds of football games. I love it as much as the next, but I don't love it when it robs our kids of the basics that they need to receive an education. And then further, distances other activities from having that cool factor. When your band kids are wearing 45-year-old band uniforms that are musty and moldy, and all of their band instruments are not maintained, and you're in a low-income area, so the kids can't afford to buy their own instruments. They're thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and typically band has the highest cost to get involved, compared to sports or other athletic activities. And it's really, really, really a tough pill to swallow for the kids who want to be, want to express themselves musically or want to be involved in a musical activity, but they know that every Friday night, while the football team runs out of a multi-million-dollar facility in brand new uniforms, feeling like the coolest, most badass kids on campus, that the band kids have to be in musty, stinky uniforms, playing falling apart instruments and just making do. And that lack of confidence, I could not give my students.
Yeah.
Because there just weren't funds. And again, thinking I would be able to justify the funds with math and just show them, here's how much advantage it costs, here's how much we need, thinking I would just get that.
Mm-hmm.
But then realizing that it's built around people.
I have a friend that works in band, and she had told me that she had requested some ukuleles.
Yeah.
And she like put out the entire thing. This is how much it would cost. This is how many students we have. We haven't had they haven't had new instruments ever. Everybody's donated.
Yeah,
actually at their school district.
We were in a similar place.
Probably was the same school district. And she, you know, who approves it? Is it the principal or the?
It depends on what it is, but it could be both or either.
Yeah. And she was like, but they didn't allow it. They didn't even approve like pencils.
No,
because they were like, you teach music. What do you need pencils for? And then so yeah, so she was really upset, and then she was able to get like money donated to be able to buy new ukuleles for all of her students,
which is crazy because when have you guys seen a athletic team or an athletic department you know, say, gosh, guys, we really just need donated uniforms, and we could just get donated football
uniforms done. But whenever they got to go out of state,
exactly,
that's typically when you see that. So when was your final year of teaching, and where did you go?
Ooh, yeah, so the last year, I think, you know, my last final year was 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and prior to 2020, you know, we'll just set the scene in February-ish of 2019. First of all, nobody knew the invisible clock that just took you down, you know, to 2020. It's kind of funny to reflect on that time and think about what we weren't thinking about, you know. But just to speak really openly, it was February 2019. I was pregnant. I was a pregnant teacher. And my kids didn't really know. I say my kids, my students didn't really know yet. And we were working on our big project for that month was a fundraiser that was a Valentine's jazz dinner. It was like really creative way to raise some money. We were really lucky. We had most of the food donated. We used the middle school band kids to be the wait staff. And our high school jazz program was really popping off at that time. I mean, it was certainly better than any jazz program I had been involved in. And that's not saying too much because that's certainly not, that idiom is not my strength as a performer or an educator. But we had been rehearsing all hours of the night, which I thought was really normal at that time. That, you know, a couple of weeks of the kids coming in, rehearsing till 9 p.m. at night. In fact, one kid was bringing boxes of mac and cheese and red solo cups, and making mac and cheese for everyone and just portioning out the cups because everyone was just trying to scramble to get this fundraiser put together. And it was a wild success. This was really bizarre to me because in this particular community, you know, music not prioritized, but we sold out. We did it in the school cafeteria, but we really dressed up everything. So it felt like, you know, candlelit dinner.
Yeah.
With us pasta and dessert and the whole nine. And it went really, really well. And it was a 2-hour set, which is a huge deal for high school musicians. I mean, it's hard for me to sit down and play a 2-hour set, but for them, it's really a big ask, especially the preparation required. And so we had an intermission. You got to put a little break in there, let those, you know, the performers eat, all of that good stuff. I had 15 or 20 minutes to eat. And in that time, I went to the bathroom. And when I got to the bathroom, I was like, oh my God, have I peed myself? I'm like, have I been in front of God and everybody at this show? And
with webcam?
Yeah, what exactly have they seen, you know, staring at my back this entire time? Well, unfortunately, I had started the process of having a miscarriage mid-show. And reflecting on that now, it's obvious the amount of hours that I was committing leading up to this 12, 14-hour days really helped drive, you know, that issue for me. And having no help because we were so underfunded at that school district, I was the only band director for 6th grade band through 12th grade band.
Oh, wow.
6 grades that I was responsible for teaching. Which, I mean, talk to any English teacher, you know, most places you don't teach 6th grade through 12th grade English or any of those things. And so, just did what I had to do and kind of made it happen. Went back out and finished the night. You know, the show must go on, all of that good stuff. But what would come out of that would be kind of a litany of health issues. I think my body just sort of started to not be able to keep up with the demand I was placing on it constantly. And fast forward about 6 months, and this miscarriage triggered kind of a wild skin disorder. And I noticed it originally on my hands, like the palm of my hands, and it would get, the skin would thicken up and then almost get like a blister. And then that skin would kind of just get removed. It was really painful. But I didn't think much of it at the time. And I continued to work these 70, 80-hour work weeks, continued to go to the superintendent and the athletic director, who was really my direct report, again, because I was kind of a coach, and beg them for assistance, beg them for finances so we could stop doing so many fundraisers. We managed every concession stand campus wide. So there were nights when I taught all day, then taught a rehearsal for 2 or 3 hours, then went and fried chicken in the concession stand for the baseball game, while the volleyball game across campus had 3 other kids and a parent in it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was an all day, all night job.
Yeah.
And my body was telling me, you have to slow down.
Yeah.
But I was telling my body, how do we even do that? If I do that, the kids won't have a band director, or the kids won't be able to go to this competition, or because there was just no assistance. There was no help. There were, 5 or 6, 7 football coaches, but there was one band director for half the school district. So all of that to say, where my breaking point was when I knew I could not continue working. This illness that kind of started in my hands and then ended up being kind of like an all over my body, but particularly the top and bottom of my feet as well, which is horrible, prevented me from physically being able to work. And this kind of, the apex of this was at the Christmas concert. I had just finished and parked the car and gotten home with an all-day concert. When we have a band concert and you're the only band director and there are 6 grades of kids that have to perform that night.
Yeah.
I mean, the logistics, the running around, the all of it. And I'm doing all of this, physically so ill. And I've got, just all of these physical ailments. I could not walk from my car in the driveway into my house. My husband was at home. He was also a band director at a different school in the area. He was having his band concert that night too. And I just parked the car and it's 11:30 at night. And I realized I can't get out of the car and walk into the house.
Yeah.
And so I parked the car and crawled into my own home. And after crawling into the house and just kind of putting myself to bed the next day, when my husband got home, I said, I have to stop doing this. I can't keep working 70-hour weeks and, spending my prep period, my 30-minute was kind of a break throughout the day that's supposed to be your 30 minutes to plan for the other 7 hours a day that you're teaching. Using it to go to the superintendent and beg for the things that we need to just kind of function on a basic level. And I just sent an email and let them know that there was no way I was going to be able to feasibly return to school because I couldn't physically walk. And then we get to January 2020, and this is when I think we had kind of, I don't know, do you remember, have we heard the rumblings of COVID yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in China.
Okay. Yeah. I think at that time, COVID was kind of brewing. I remember some conversations I had with students where I was like, yeah, this is not a big deal, guys. Calm down,
Yeah.
LOL.
It was still in China for a good while.
Right.
Like February it started.
Yeah. It's like way out there in the distance. And I had emailed my building principal, who was my boss, and my athletic director and the superintendent, let them know, I think I even maybe had sent photos that this was not your normal illness. This was, I'm talking to doctors who are saying we're going to have major medical procedures to try to correct some of this so that I was at this point already kind of bound to a rollator, which is kind of like a slightly more mobile version of a wheelchair. But just I could not walk, could barely, my fingertips didn't have skin on them. So I can barely type or draft an email, let alone do anything else. And throughout this journey of like figuring out how bad it was going to be, became aware I couldn't return to work and started to utilize the short-term disability policy that I had opted into as a teacher. And the minute that I started down the short-term disability path, this triggers something at the administrative office, because when they see that you're starting to utilize disability funds and pull on those policies, in their head, this translates to, we need a what's called a long-term sub. And a long-term sub is just like, oh, we're going to have a sub for the foreseeable future until this educator is able to get back to work. And to them, that translates to, well, we have to now pay our educator and pay a substitute teacher. And I had, being a young teacher at this time, you get a certain allotment of sick days. But, and if there are any teachers out there listening, you need to look into this, because this is something I did not know. It turns out that if you run out of your allotted sick days, at least this is what happened at the school I worked at, they will start billing you what you cost to pay them. And so I had ran out of sick days dealing with this illness and trying to apply for short-term disability and all of these things, probably somewhere early March of that year, right as the pandemic was really starting to, come over to the States and become a massive problem. And what I found out in May of that year, whenever I got to the place where I was like, I know I can't come back to this. Realistically, I've got to think about next steps. Was that for almost 3 months, they had been totaling up how much money I owed them. And the disability money is 60% of your income. So it's not your full paycheck. It's definitely, a portion of the pay that you were normally receiving. So my husband and I are already on a highly unexpected reduced income. And we were building a house at the time. We had put down a $10,000 deposit to build this house, and the foundation had been poured, and we were really excited about this. It had been going on for 5 or 6 months. And then the illness happens, and we need this short-term disability policy, and we can't seem to get approved. And while we're trying to get the approval process figured out, we finally find out that it's my employer that is holding up the short-term disability application process. And so we go, my husband had finally had enough. I mean, we'd been given the runaround by the school district constantly. And we go up there to meet with the superintendent, who, of course, I have this tumultuous relationship with, right? Because I've been the advocate for the arts department and kind of pointing out, I've been a thorn in their side, realistically, for the last year. She won't shut up, right? And so here we come trying to figure out, what is going on. We're getting to where we're going to have to talk about terminating building our home. At some points it got so tough. At some point I was like, are we going to be able to buy groceries this week? Because of the loss of income. And when we got to the superintendent's office, she had totaled up all of the money we owed her. It was nearly $20,000. And told us that they would cut us a deal. They'll put the disability paperwork through that day, which they did. But my first disability check needed to go to the school district. And it did. And I wish for the life of me that I had kind of just stood up for myself in that situation. But
this was in May of 2020.
Yeah. This was in early May, after months of trying to figure out why our disability process was getting held up. To find out it was my employer. Then to find out that more or less they were trying to use it as a bargaining chip because we owed them this money. I just did not realize that when you ran out of sick days. And conveniently, I don't think I was ever notified that for every day missed after my sick days ran out, that they would suddenly they essentially take your salary and divide it by 52 weeks and find out what you cost them every single week or every single day. And then they start billing you for that. And it was a 5-figure number.
And then once May 2020, and then all of that had happened. What pushed you? I mean, you went through so many hardships. So why did you go back into a workforce? And
I actually didn't quit teaching. I was non-renewed.
Okay.
So that's a school district's equivalent of firing you.
Okay.
So when you're a teacher, you sign a contract in term. And after they got my disability check, they sent me an email basically the next day and said, you've been non-renewed.
Oh, wow.
And then I was at this decision-making point of, well, do I go find another teaching job? And that point, my illness really still hadn't been resolved. It was looking up. I got on some like very new to the market drugs. And today I'm living with it virtually managed by just stress management and just changing that lifestyle. But yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing. I don't think I've ever actually even come right out and said that more or less I was fired as a result of that. And so, yeah, to bring this all back around to kind of the teacher funding question about pay raises, it's great in theory to some degree to do this kind of somewhat performative thing and say we're going to raise teacher wages to $50,000 or $54,000. But only people who are outside of the school district and don't know about the funding disparities that are already taking place would oversimplify the problem like that. There just has to be money. It's already a critical situation in the public school level where administrators tell students that they are less valuable depending on which activity they want to be involved in. If you want to be in this category of activities, we're going to provide this much money. If you want to be in the more artistic category of activities, you'll get little to no support financially from the district. And so that's already happening. And what this pressure to answer that $50,000 or I guess now $54,000.
It depends on stuff. Yeah.
The answer to that, it's just more of the same, skirting funds around and taking from, a teacher who has spent 20 years trying to get to that $50,000 number themselves, stealing from them to make that happen, for other educators. And again, a lot of this is mass overgeneralization. There are, school districts with lots of tax money because of the income of their area that are making it work. They're able to get frugal about some things, or you do have school districts in Arkansas that the top echelon of administrators are highly ethical people. I have met great school administrators, but again, speaking in broad strokes, especially these 4 or 5A school districts that are kind of off the beaten path a little bit. They're not right in the middle of, what we consider here, especially in Northwest Arkansas, to be the bigger cities, right? There are people that have made an institution out of prioritizing funds going to their special little activity in their heart, instead of considering the picture of, hey, we're talking about kids here who just have their only job from kindergarten to 12th grade is just to figure out who they are. And if the thing that you're telling them that they are less valuable than something some other kid is, they're going to internalize that just like every other bleeding artist that you've ever met. That stuff really starts at what I thought was, the school level in high school, but it really starts so much earlier than that. It's the administrator that has decided where the funds should go. And
did you get a bit of that then, and then kind of go into the corporate world?
Yeah, I think that I had my fill. I think that it was just everything I'd done in teaching was all the hardships, all the things you hear about. It was all justified on the it's for the kids, thing. But yeah, when that happens and you're genuinely ill and you're extremely sick and you're 27 years old and your husband's having to carry you from one end of the house, help bathe you and those kinds of things, and then to have some massive show like I had with that school district where they just kind of told me who they really are, it just made me wake up for a second and realize that you can't do anything if you're so physically sick, And so, I started looking for well, how the hell do I get out of here? I had this music education.
Did you want to do that right away? How long did it take for you?
Oh gosh.
To recover?
Yeah. Thank God for my husband. COVID happened and he was kind of working from home and, as most teachers were, and he was able to help get me back to health. We really unfortunately challenged the sickness and health part of the house, really inordinately early in the relationship. And So he was able to float us. We did lose the house that we were building. We had to beg back the deposit. Luckily, our builder was just a really genuinely good human and gave us that money back. But in general, yeah, I physically could not get back to work right away. So it really wasn't until later in that year when I started going, okay, the meds are working. I'm going stir crazy being at home. I mean, I just can't. That's just not me. And what do we do? How do we go? And the first thing I thought was that my teaching was going to be such a handicap on the situation. I really thought that it was going to inhibit me, that I'd spent 5 years being a teacher. But if you're a teacher out there in the world and you're dealing with some bizarre situation like this, which unfortunately, I'm sure I'm not even the worst story out there. It's the tip of the iceberg with some of these things.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff happening at scale with educators right now, horrible things. But you being a teacher is not a disadvantage, especially I can really only speak to the corporate kind of transition. But my first instinct was to go back to college, right? But without a band scholarship to rely on, and the fact that I've been 5-6 years since I've been in a collegiate setting, it just didn't financially make sense, especially because we were struggling so hard. I just couldn't imagine how I could make that happen. So the sort of first entry point, and what I would recommend anybody trying to get out of any career path do, there are career certificates online. They are either zero cost or they're so close to free, like $20 or $30.
Yeah.
And you can truly do almost.
Google offers a lot of
the Google career certificates. Holy cow.
Yeah.
And the reason that those Google career certificates work is because Google was dissatisfied, and other major companies, there's tons of, the Fortune 5s that have developed these courses. They're dissatisfied with what the labor force from college was coming into their business. That knowledge.
Screw it. Let's do our own thing.
Exactly, right? And why not? That's kind of a brilliant plan. Go take those, because I just became engrossed with them. I'm obviously a self-professed nerd. And so it was great because, number one, you don't have to commit to some massive bill just to find out if you want to go down a certain career path. I would recommend any high school age kid even
Did you take a risk and do one of those?
I did, yeah. I did actually 4 or 5 of them, and I settled on kind of a project management certificate. Was sort of the direction that I went. And project management basically just means exactly what it sounds like. Like, you're just going to hold people accountable for getting their part of the project done. I was like, well, damn, that's teaching 101,
Yeah.
And so there was a ton of transferable skills, and started looking around for a job after I had completed a couple of those course certificate programs. And, found some small to medium-sized companies in Northwest Arkansas. And there's so much business growth in this area. If you're trying to transition out of any career path, I really don't know if you can do better than the course certificates. It may be extremely marketable to the insane amount of, small businesses that are becoming medium-sized businesses in this area, medium-sized that are becoming large-sized businesses in this area. The hiring in corporate America is kind of a rapid onset. I did a lot of learning in my first corporate job. There were a shocking amount of similarities.
And your first corporate job was like in
Fayetteville, and it was actually in project management.
Okay.
It was very adjacent to marketing, and ended up transferring that project management skill and ability into, they had a marketing opening in the company I was in, and I'd kind of always been a little bit of a marketer, had a photography background, anything artistic. I was that kid. There's so many of those kids in school, just anything that feels artsy fartsy. That's what we want to do. And so I had my hand in a lot of stuff like that. And there was an opening in the marketing department at the corporation I was working for as PM, and they just need to get a lay of the land there. And I went in and did some reports and helped push some projects through and clean some stuff up, and was kind of promoted to the full-time marketing director role.
Yeah.
And I remember getting that job, and just the first month or two was a complete sprint because it was definitely a rocky transition. But I remember just being like, oh, this is what I am supposed to be doing.
So you did
supposed to be able, yeah, finally.
Okay.
I've been on this whole journey of college and working and all these things. And I don't know if I ever felt for one single day that I was certainly where I was exactly meant to be.
Did you still like to want that feeling though? You kind of like fought
Always. Yeah, I think everybody does, right? I think the question is whether or not you listen to the feeling. And I wasn't. I blocked all sense of, obviously we should get out of this. This is not the right. I just like had turned all that on me.
crawled into your
home. Yeah. I mean, only somebody that, is really just segmenting their life and compartmentalizing could get to that and still not come to the obvious conclusion. But yeah, there were all kinds of rocky and tough situations within my corporate job, especially once I took the promotion. But I was, for the most part, I was treated like an adult, which seems so silly. But for the most part, I was treated like an adult. And if I could logically justify why funds needed to go somewhere, then okay, they could go there. Yeah. And, I don't want to oversimplify. The approval processes and red tape are much more complicated in the public school system, but it's not that complicated. So all of that to say, it was overall a pretty positive experience at that company. And I got to cut my teeth, more or less. I really appreciated kind of that. I continued to have health problems, and that's the thing I want to say about this story is that it's not like I got out of teaching and everything magically physically got fixed. I still have had, struggled with the same condition, struggled with recurrent miscarriage, which I feel like as women, we just don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
And
you had happened to go through
two miscarriages and still having, robust issues with my skin while I was at that corporate job. But the difference in how I was treated as an employee, just as a human, was night and day. And that's what seems so
you were like 2,
I think, almost 2 years. And finally, again, needed some additional health and surgeries. And my husband also transitioned out of teaching because of he just witnessed this and thought, gosh, they just don't care about teachers. They don't care about me either. So, he's kind of running a side timeline of becoming a nurse. And luckily, towards the end of last year, I had some health issues ramping up again. Not luckily, but luckily he was working by that time as a nurse.
Okay.
And again, he's come back and supported me to give me the freedom to say, okay, well, you can kind of part ways with that company. Like so mutually happy for both parties that I stepped away.
And, this is all within a span of 3 to 7, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
So what kind of you lost everything. You lost your future house. You lost what you thought you were going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So many things, your health, so many things that people take for granted. What kept you going? And what words of encouragement do you have for people who could be going through something similar?
Wow. That's, honestly, I know every teacher in the world, and I am still a teacher at heart, even at the company that I now running for myself that I own. I'm still educating clients every day. I'm still telling people, here's what's happening and here's what you should do. But at that time, it was the kids. I had kids. There was a newspaper article, our kids went to the school board went to school board meetings complaining about not having a capable substitute because the sub was just sub, so band was not band anymore. I had kids on prom night come to my house and sit in my living room with me, and that it's all about the kids and it's for the kids. It can't only take you so far, as I learned. You still can't sacrifice your health for somebody else's kid. But yeah, I mean, that's what pushed me through. And then my spouse, my partner, my husband is just kind of, my best friends call him King Alex. He's just very awesome. He's just always down to just figure it out. Oh yeah, this is a horrible thing that's happening. There's 5 things we can control. Let's control those things. Sure. We can control you getting a career certificate. We can control you looking for another job. You will find a job. And just being the voice of reason behind an extremely emotionally tumultuous time. I think that he just really pushed it through. And I also had a really good friend support group at that time as well, and some good mentors that talk to me, talk to me about seeking an attorney and, just different things. I just had such a good support system. I worry about any teacher or educator that doesn't have that, because I know there are young teachers that are isolated. But just know that if you're experiencing like some version of a story that I just described that happened to me, I know that I'm not a rare case.
Mhm.
While the story sounds rare and it's very much a buckle up, get ready, it's really not. And I would just say, if you don't have a support system, you can message me. We have people call us about once every other month asking, hey, from college, so how did you get out of teaching again? Those are constant Facebook messages, constant phone calls. And I don't want to advocate for the mass exodus of teachers everywhere. It's devastating that I'm a statistic. I hate that. And I hate every time I see an educator leave, but also on the granular level, we're physically borderline abusing some of these human beings, putting them in situations that are impossible to help kids, and then letting them answer to the kid that doesn't receive the financial support that a different kid does. So I think all of those things kind of helped me persevere and push through to be able to take control of my own life, like I have now.
Okay. Thank you for being on this journey. If you're watching, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow us on all social platforms. We just got on YouTube. We're trying to hit 100 subscribers. And thank you, Hayley. Again, that's Hayley Evans, former educator and now her own boss.
Yep.